Alrighty, so today I'm going to be talking about leaders that are getting help with the release of Legends of the Force. I do some kind of variation of this with most new set releases. I think it's cool to go back, look at the older leaders. So it's going to be the leaders from set 1 through set 4 that may be getting a power boost with the release of the new set. So that's what we're going to cover. Before we get going, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, check out my Patreon as well. All right, so like I said, we're going to cover the set 1 through 4 leaders that improve with the release of Legends of the Force. I'm going to review some of the cards that I think kind of boost these leaders, ways to maybe build decks around them, and keep in mind, this is not a list of like meta. Like, I'm not ranking these 1 through 10 based on what I think are going to be the best leaders. I'm ranking them based on which ones I think got the most help. So you will see a mix of like fringier leaders that I don't expect to become like meta dominant, and you will see a few meta dominant leaders that are also getting some help with this set. All right, so first up, this is kind of an honorable mention. I'm going to put Darth Vader here, but he's kind of a placeholder for most space aggro. He's likely the best version of it right now. But I think this archetype as a whole is getting a boost, and it's not because of new cards at all. In fact, most of these space aggro decks hardly get any help at all, if any. There's very few cards like I would look at for like a Darth Vader yellow aggro deck. There's maybe a couple, but nothing that's majorly shifting this archetype. What I think is benefiting something like Darth Vader and maybe other space aggro decks is actually what you see on the right here. All these force bases and all these force decks kind of propping up. What you'll notice in testing and in deck building these force decks is that they are practically entirely ground based. There are no force units that fly except for Leia. And in general, you kind of just have to stick on the ground because the only way to continuously chain this force mechanic is to keep attacking with your force units. And the moment you kind of go away from that, like playing in space or playing non-force units, you might lose that force token, and then all your synergies kind of fall apart. A lot of your payoffs require that mechanic. So these are very ground-focused decks, and currently, as being constructed, they don't have a lot of good ways to interact with space, especially space aggression. So I think right now, these space aggro decks, like Vader, very much are benefiting from this mechanic being introduced. Now, I don't expect force mid-range decks to be like the only thing present, and the ones that are good will have to figure out ways to deal with space in general, but at least early in the format, something like a Darth Vader deck can very much feast on untuned versions of force mid-range decks. So that's what we get him an honorable mention here. It's not a card-specific benefit that Vader or other aggro space decks got, just more of a mechanical shift in the format. All right, but let's go into number 10. This is pretty minor, but I do think Grand Moff Tarkin, set 1 leader, does get a bit of a boost. There's a couple cool cards that work well with him. Vanny here is a nice 2 cost with like a solid stat line, 2/4. He's got the Imperial trait, of course. He's also an official, which can matter if you're gonna do something like Emperor Royal Guard in this deck. But what's nice about him, he's got a pretty relevant when played and on attack ability that works with Grand Moff, because you can move experience around. So you can even double dip on experience tokens because you can attack with something that has experience. Then when Vanny attacks, you can move that experience to himself or to something else. It just gives a nice utility on a kind of solid statted 2-drop for the deck. And then what it might be a bit of a bigger deal is actually Captain Enoch, and there are a lot of troopers. I don't think you can build a Grand Moff Tarkin entirely trooper based, but I think you can play a decent amount of troopers. And as long as you have a decent amount of them, something like Captain Enoch can be quite good. He is also Imperial, very relevant, and he can get pretty big, right? The moment he's a 3/5, it's already solid, and that shouldn't be, he's not really what you plan on playing on turn 2, but he's somewhat of a decent card for rebuilding later in the game. Mostly, you probably still need to build this leader with other synergies in mind. Maybe yellow, where you go for a lurking TIE Phantom cheese, or blue, where you're more you have some more controlling options. but I do think both of these cards give a nice little boost to this leader who may not become tier 1, but can be interesting to build around. At 9, we got Captain Phasma, and I put all the first order cards here. Now, I don't expect a Captain Phasma blue to really matter, so probably this Supremacy tie is not that relevant. But the other 4 are all first order units, and they're solid, right? They're not incredible. Like, none of these cards are transcendent, but the big issue Captain Phasma previously had is there simply wasn't enough first order in the game to actually even build a deck around her. And now, with 4 new units that you can include, and they're not bad, like the Knight of Ren is actually quite good, a 3-cost 4/4. You have a decent ship in the Exegol Patroller. The Praetorian Guards, okay, nothing fancy. Maybe Kylo can fit in there, especially if you're going to be playing with upgrades. But you do at least get a large chunk of options to include in this deck. Will this be tier 1? Almost certainly not. It's just going to be more playable. And, you know, this isn't, not everything we do is to make the number 1 deck ever. I mean, I try to do that a lot, but I also like playing off-brand leaders, and Captain Phasma can be interesting now, especially in a green shell. You see most of these cards are green, and you even get the powerful Captain Phasma unit card as well. So something to do with this leader finally. Maybe you can build a decent deck, a decent aggressive Phasma build. All right, number 8, a favorite of mine, and I have included some cards here on the screen, like Adigalia and Yaddle, 2 really good Force 2 drops, Ki-Adi-Mundi, an absolutely busted Force payoff, but in reality, the big benefit here is just like the Force mechanic in general, because Chirrut is a very good way to turn that on. It's a 5 deploy leader who's very sturdy, right? He doesn't die, so you can build this blue-red style Force deck around Chirrut. Will it be the best version of blue-red Force? I don't think so. Chirrut, at this point in the game, maybe has fallen behind a little bit, because although he has a very, very powerful deploy effect, he's essentially a blank ability on his leader side, and it might be just too much of a cost at this point with 5 sets out to play a leader that essentially does nothing when he's not deployed. But he's a very sturdy enabler for all the Force synergies and the new Force mechanic. There's a bunch of new cards in this set that are Force that you can build into the Chirrut deck. Chirrut already benefits more from cards like Forces with Me, and it binds all things. He has an easier time turning things on, like Mystic Reflection and Force Throw. He's good with Jedi Lightsaber, and then it kind of works with all the new Force cards like Adigalia, Yaddle, Ki-Adi. There's Itinerant Warrior, there's Mace Windu, like all these Force synergy cards all fit into this blue-red Chirrut shell. I really enjoy playing with this leader. Certainly going to be building around this leader. I don't think it'll be the best blue-red, unfortunately, but I think it'll be quite solid. And at 7, this is going to be a very similar conversation. It's Anakin Skywalker, and this isn't about cards in particular, again, like I've included Mace and Adigalia on this list, but it's not so much about that. It's more actually about his ability and how it works really well with a lot of these early units. If you've played so far in testing, especially into like Force mirrors, if you can keep someone off that Force token, you can really walk away with games. And Anakin is going to have a much easier time doing that because of his ability. All these 2/4s or 2/3s that are bashing into each other, well, he breaks parity on all of that. He makes your units trade up. If you go first, for instance, with Anakin, and you start on the ground, there's like hardly anything your opponent can do to not get crushed by your turn 1, especially if they are trying to get a Force token. There are a few that can survive, like Gunji's a 2/5. There's the yellow one that immediately gives you the Force token. There's like the 2/2 shielded unit. There are a few, but Anakin can slay so many units on turn 1, and a lot of these Force stuff just have less power than they have health, and he breaks that paradigm really well, and he also benefits from just the addition of all these powerful Force cards, because he was also being built with some Force synergy in mind. Like Force Throw, of course, was a card that was played in most Anakin decks, and you can include a few more payoffs now that you have so many more Force units to include in a deck like this. So that's why I've added Anakin. Again, it's not so much card specific, it's more just like how his ability interacts with the early game that is kind of developing. All right, number 6, Chancellor Palpatine, and the big one here for that he benefits from is just the new Anakin Legendary. Him and additionally the new Anakin leader are probably the easiest ways to simply enable this card. Very easy to get a double trigger in this Chancellor deck for the Anakin, and when he does double trigger, the card is absolutely crazy because it's kind of like playing a Luke a turn earlier, and in fact it's a little better than a Luke because you can actually split the -3s. You don't have to give -6 to one unit, so that's a huge buff. But it's not exclusively the only thing he's gained. He's also gained early heroic units like Yaddle and Lothwolf. These are defensive units that you can play on turn 1, and it's important, of course, that they're heroic because you need your heroic units to die to enable Chancellor's flip. So you now have quite a suite of early heroic plays to run with Chancellor to start that chain going. And Yaddle has Restore, which means if they're not killing it, you can heal up, right, and be defensive. Lothwolf have Sentinel. They kind of have to kill it if they're playing on the ground. So nice cards to kind of help solidify his early game. And one really major payoff, of course, there's things like Darth Vader and Xian Flurry, which is like a cool combo. He's in the colors to do that. But overall, I think like the main target, like the main benefit here for him is that he now has enough early game units to really like get the train rolling, and he's got a really big payoff in Anakin. So cool to mess around with. He is still a leaderless leader. It's a major hit. It is sometimes very difficult to overcome how big of a downside that is, because you're losing a massive deploy effect that every other deck is going to have, but you get to do some cool other stuff, and it's fun to build around. All right, at number 5, I've included Cad Bane, and he makes this list almost every time just because Underworld is just a trait FFG likes to support. A lot of other traits don't get support. Look at poor Phasma. Like, we're talking about Exegol Starfighter, a 3/1 Overwhelm, as like, yay, we got a new First Order card. Well, look at this stuff. Aura Sing is absolutely insane as a 2-drop. Like, this might be one of the best 2-drops in the game, period, without even considering synergy. And now she's also just an Underworld, which means she works with Cad Bane, she works with McClunky, just a beast. Nile Marauder, this is another very good, it's a 5 health turn 2 play, which is a nice spot to be in, and the fact that he can attack for 4 is actually really relevant with Cad Bane's pings, because it means that this guy can actually kill other 5 health turn 2 plays, which is a big thing that was actually being used to block Cad Bane ping Tarkin Town, or like Quinlan ping Tarkin Town. Right now they go turn to Cassian, you can play a Nile Marauder ping, and now all of a sudden you're representing a 1-shot on that Cassian, something that you weren't able to do previously. And then lastly, this legendary Marchion Row, maybe. I think it's cool that it doubles Cad Bane's raid innately, and then look at the 2 cards underneath him. They both have raid as well. He might be too slow as just a 6-drop that doesn't have like giant board effect, but in Cad Bane in particular, he does kind of instantly enable Cad to attack for 6. He also triggers Cad Bane's ping, which is nice. So there is some room there. There's also a couple new Underworld space units in red. There's the 0-3 with raid. There's the 2-3 with raid 2. I didn't include them on this list. I think those are more fringy, but there's just a lot. And Cad Bane, the fact that he's already a good deck and now gets just like, these aren't like game changers, right? These are just like lateral upgrades, right, to some cards, like a better 2-drop than it needed to run, a better 3-drop than it needed to run. But all this adds up to just a better deck overall, and Cad Bane certainly gets help from this stuff. All right, at number 4, I've put Kira. Kira is currently one of the best decks in the game. I took Kira to win a regional championship with this leader. So, of course, I like Kira. What does Kira get? Well, it gets Darth Vader. Every villain blue deck can get Darth Vader, but she is usually the best leader for like a bluish control-y shell. Now, Vader needs ambush, which means you need either green for ECL or timely intervention, which is already what Kira is in. That's usually the color paired with Kira, or you can play the aforementioned Qian Flurry if you're going to play it with yellow. I really do think you need to build around that ambush mechanic with Darth Vader, but it slides really well into a Kira deck. You can go back to playing this with ECL, and you now have a power play on 6 resources that you didn't previously have. Or you can stick with Data Vault and just run a bunch of timely interventions in the deck, and then you either have a 7 cost version of this or of this card, or even an 8 cost if you're smuggling the timely for later in the game. And I think those are also reasonable. Vader is just so crazy when you can actually get that ambush off, killing a massive unit, killing a middle unit, and then also leaving behind a powerful body, potentially throwing a shield on some other thing. So this is kind of my spiel on Darth Vader. I mentioned him in the Chancellor deck as well because you can play it with Qian Flurry, but it just slides well into a Kira shell. It's not the only thing that Kira got, though. Supremacy Tie is a really, really sneaky good card. It's so much better than Black Sun Starfighter because you can shield this and you couldn't shield the 3/2 ship. And that makes so much of a difference. It also keeps it out of range of like things like Daring Raid, which the other card couldn't. It still comes out of Vader. It can ambush better if you're going to be playing with ECL or Timely Intervention because it can survive attacking into 2 power units like Lurking TIE Phantom. So it's just a sneaky good card. And it really helps the archetype. And lastly, Eye of Scion, another sneaky good card. It's a 6-drop, which is typically been the weakest resource cost in the deck, Vigilance being kind of the only card you would ever play on 6 resources in a Kira deck. Now you have potentially Darth Vader if you're doing it with ECL, but you also have an ambushing spaceship, and like with Supremacy Tie, Eye of Scion, Devastating Gunship, Inferno 4, all of a sudden this deck's actually kind of good in space, which has typically been the weakest part of these blue-green mid-rangey control shells in Villain. With this card and the tie, like, are you actually even like that scared of something like a Vader yellow deck anymore? Like, Eye of Scion is actually really good. It like, it's not a bomb, but it just fills a gap that the deck had. And you know, it has a lot of like minor keywords, like Overwhelm's not that important, Hidden is not that important, but like Restore 1, sneaky good. Ambush, of course, is the main keyword here that matters. So these are all cards that are good in Kira, and Kira is already one of the best decks in the game, so I expect it to continue to be a powerful force moving forward. At 3, Gar Saxon, and this is another one like Cad Bane that makes this list a lot because there's always just new shielded units, and Gar Saxon may have said been like a shielded keyword leader. That's kind of what we do with him. All these shielded units are so good with Gar, but look at Secretive Sage. This is just another crafty smuggler. And then with Krennic, who's like the third, you now have 9 turn 1s that you can play that are 3/2 shielded units. And that is so much. Starting, like, you know the difference when you start a game with one of those units versus not. And when you only had 6 of them between Crafty and Krennic, about half the time you wouldn't. And now you're going to start with it almost every time. Now we have also an upgraded 3-drop, Axe Woves. He comes in as a 4/3, just like the 3/3 shielded Outlaw card. But he has even more upside because now you throw things like blasters or hot shots and or snapshots, and they're even better on him, right? They're going to give an extra +1/+1. So he's just another really solid 3-drop. Shin Hati as well. So look at your 3-drops now between these two. You can play 7th Fleet Defender. You have the other 3/3 shielded unit. Your whole deck is just curving out these really powerful units. Like Shin Hati is a 5/2 hidden shielded when you play this. It's representing so much damage. I didn't even include it. Darth Vader comes with a shield. So like if you're going to play with yellow, maybe you play with Qian Flurry. It's probably a little too cute because there's not a lot of force, but Shin Hati has force as well. Or if you want to go pivot into a green version with ECL, you can try that too. So Darth Vader is also a consideration for this Gar deck. But this is like a similar idea to CAD, right? These are just lateral upgrades the way Cads, Aura Sing, and Nile Marauder laterally upgrade the deck, but I feel like these are even like more impactful than Cad's upgrades because Gar had more holes in his curve than Cad did, and now those holes, especially turn 1 and turn 2, are practically gone. Like, you actually just have infinite of these shielded units you can play, so Gar getting a lot of love with this release. All right, at number 2, one of my favorite leaders, and let's get this out of the way. No, I do not think Grand Inquisitor is going to be like a meta deck, unfortunately. He is still an incredibly weak deploy leader at 6 cost, 3/6 stats, but he is getting a ton of help as well. So we'll start with the big one, the Grand Inquisitor Legendary. So this is just a very good card. It, of course, works with Grand Inquisitor. You can ready it immediately and attack for 4. Raid being really nice, of course, with Grand Inquisitor because it's kind of hidden power. You can still ready this guy even though he's attacking for 4. And hidden being really important too because they can't really interact with this Grand Inquisitor when you play it. So you play it, you ready it, they can't like attack and kill it even though it only has 2 health. So you kind of get that guaranteed damage. Even more important, though, is the fact that he gives your leader hidden as well when you deploy your Grand Inquisitor. So that turn, that 6 resource turn, you can lead with this unit. You can ready it with Grand Inquisitor's ability, hit for 4 immediately, flip Grand Inquisitor. He is protected, right? He is hidden. So you're going to have that opening to actually attack with him, potentially ready Grand Inquisitor unit again, or some other unit that you may have played. It just makes that flip turn much safer, something that was often a big issue because it was just too hard to get this guy out and actually like chain these ready effects because he was just instantly dying every time. So Grand Inquisitor, the biggest buff for this deck, but we have a few more. Thralls of the Coven is a small upgrade to the Clan Challengers, who were a 3/6 raid 3. This is a 3/7, so just a little sturdier, right? And that can matter because when you ready Clan Challengers, they only have 4 health. More things can kill a 4 health unit than a 5 health unit. It's just math, right? So Thralls, a nice little upgrade there if you were going for that kind of combo, especially with sneak attack where you could like sneak it in, attack for 6, ready it, attack for 6. It's a ton of damage out of nowhere. Aura Sing, not much to say here. One of the best 2 drops, like I mentioned with Cad, works well here as well because she can attack for 3 even though she only has 1 power. Nile Marauder, very similar ideas. Aura Sing, just a solid 3 drop. And Scimitar, pretty cool that this can attack for 6 when you ready it. You can only ever ready it once, of course, because the moment you put damage into it, it does have 6 power. That power is not hidden. It's not raid, so you can't like go off on the Grand Inquisitor flip turn with this. But being able to play a 4 drop then immediately attack for 6 with it is really nice. So I've usually built Grand Inquisitor as a yellow deck because I feel like sneak attack was a big piece of it. You had like shielded units that were nice with Grand Inquisitor, and Jabba the Hutt I thought always worked really well with him. And he's getting a nice buff in some yellow cards here as well. So it's likely where I would start if I was messing with him, but it's not exclusive, right? You can play in aggression. There's the new double red card, some version of Vizsla, I think. I don't remember the exact name, but it gets basically double raid. It's for every damage on him, he gets +2 power, and he comes in as a 3/6. So the moment you ready him, he can actually attack for 7, which is pretty beastly. So you could try for double red. I know blue sometimes has some success with the grit units. So just a lot of help for this leader who desperately needed a lot of help. I wish his stat line was just better. Even like a 3/7, I think would have gone a long way to making this more playable, but we'll definitely be experimenting with some Grand Inquisitor. All right, last, and you can see infinite cards on this list. This is the Han Solo from set 2, and I don't think I am discovering something particularly unique here. Just so many of the cards that were released in this set just read so well with this guy, especially when you are playing with the Force mechanic. And he might end up being the best version of a Force red deck simply because of how well he works with so many of these cards. So I've put different flavors, right? You've got blue, right? You got Ogdo Bogdo, who may not even make the deck in a Force-centric version of this because he himself is not a Force unit, and you usually want to play a Force unit on turn 1, but Still kind of crazy that you can play a turn 1 5/3 in this deck. Churret and Internet Warrior. Yep, Internet Warrior. They're both really good as they're coming in early, especially the Warrior that is a 4/2 shielded that can heal. You just, and then you have to remember all the like blue-red force stuff that already existed. And, I kind of buried the lead here. We can start with the red stuff, Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu. These are both obviously incredible when you play them ahead of curve. Ki-Adi on turn 2 comes down, draws you 2 cards as long as you started with a force unit. Mace Windu for 5 cost. Wow, that card is crazy. Now we can move on to green, right? Look at green. You can do this Eth Koth early, and you just have a 5/2 that resupplies when he dies. Kellerin early, crazy. The cost reduction on him is so good because it just means he can go fetch bigger units. So you can play him for 6R and he just is home 1, or you play him later and he can fetch even bigger units. Yoda a turn earlier. What a bomb, right? Green is probably the one that's most like bomb centric. There's so many big units you can play, and then it's not even to get into the stuff that already existed. Yellow, probably a more utility version of a Han build, but you have some options there as well. So overall, the force mechanic, even though this Han leader isn't a force leader, because he gets to play all the 2 and all the 3-drop force units as turn 1 plays, he kind of has no shortage of the ability to keep that force mechanic online. And so much of the force mechanic is front loaded in value. So like a lot of these cards have very powerful when played effects, right? And that makes them less impacted by having 2 damage on them because they get so much of their value front loaded, especially those big bombs in green, but like also the red ones and then some of the blue ones, right? The damage isn't that relevant. And when the damage isn't that relevant, Han's ability is crazy powerful. So he gets help in all colors, and he might just, like I said, might be the best build of a force deck moving forward. So that's why he makes number 1. It's because there's just so many options here. I'm not sure he will be the best deck ever. It's really hard to tell so early. And the force mechanic as a whole is very in red. Like, you kind of have to play so much of your deck surrounding this one mechanic. And sometimes there's cards that you want to include that you have difficulty fitting into the deck because they aren't force. And the moment, if you've started playing and you realize like the moment you lose that force token, it's hard to get it back sometimes if your opponent is kind of interacting with your board. So that's why maybe the mechanic won't be the most crazy push thing in the world, but Han does it really well. A lot of these cards work really well with him, with this leader coming out a turn earlier with all these powerful when played effects, and that's why he gets that number 1 slot. All right, that's what I got. Let me know what other leaders you think may have gotten help with this set. I didn't want to do too many, so possibly have left out some that that did get benefited. But yeah, leave a comment, hit that like, that subscribe, check out the Patreon if you're interested in some more content, and until next time, take care.